Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Viktoria Kanar. Victoria, excited to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yes, absolutely. You're doing so many phenomenal things. So I'm super inspired to talk about Victoria and all the awesome things before we jump into the interview. And as a fashion producer and entrepreneur, Victoria brings together key experts and innovators from around the world to develop new and circular initiatives that will have a long term impact on how we manufacture, purchase, sell, and recycle textiles. Victoria had the pleasure to work with major local and international organizations such as LVMH, Tel Aviv Municipality, Tel Aviv Fashion Week, Minister of Foreign Affairs in Israel, and many, many more. And before we popped into this interview, I was reading a little bit more about Victoria, and she's definitely an innovator. She's definitely a problem solver as well too. And I was listening to one of her interviews, and she said, "Where there's a problem, there can also be a solution." If you hear all the things that I'm sure we're going to talk about today, you'll see why she said that. And you don't have to really choose either or, whether you can make an impact or do good. I love that she embodies the fact that you can do both and you can do both better. So super excited to have you on the show, Victoria. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Oh, yes, I am.
Awesome. Well, let's get it started then. So to kick everything off, let's rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
It was completely by accident. I mean, I had a PR agency before I became a startup CEO, and I was a partner there. And we did a lot of amazing things, and it was all great. But I didn't really see myself as someone that one day would actually represent a new technology and a whole new approach, how to solve one of the biggest problems in one of the biggest industries out there. So it really was something that came completely as a surprise to me. But looking back, I guess it wasn't that surprising, because I guess being a CEO means that at the end of the day, you have the courage to do something that nobody else had done before. So that was more or less always part of my nature, not to be afraid of challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're tackling a huge problem, which is why I appreciate, all the, awesome things that you're doing. It's so funny that you hear so often people say that, I didn't expect I would be doing this, but I think when you have it like within your DNA of being that problem solver, saying like, there's got to be a better way, and then realizing that you have to be that better way, that's when you kind of end up in these great scenarios.
Yes, it's basically when you see repeatedly over again, and when you meet the same problem, the same challenge, the same development, and then you feel like, okay, it seems like there's nobody out there that is actually tackling it. So I will just continue this way, sort of being part of many, or I will really try to do something different. And I guess this is what will make me sleep better at night, because I know that I've actually I tried it out. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the true innovation happens. I think so many times we get caught in like, oh, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it goes. That's just how it has to be. But I think it's true entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners that say, no, it doesn't have to be that. And I'm going to kind of roll up my sleeves, for lack of a better term, to try to see and make sure that this is making the world a better place.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. It's really jumping in there, oftentimes in very cold water. Uh,
Hmm.
but um, but the funny thing is, you don't always even feel that cold water right away, because you're just so kind of heated up and you just really want to make it happen. So yeah, it's just bring it on.
Yeah, I love that cold water analogy because I think when you have that passion that and you're fueled by all the things, you don't feel like it's cold water until sometimes later, and then you're so passionate about like seeing the end of what you wanted to see that you're committed to, and you're gonna kind of continue to trudge through that water.
Yeah, it's really pretty much that. It's you I think you also learn how to not get frustrated or bothered, or definitely not stopped by anything that sort of comes along and could be seen as a disturbance, or could be seen as a sign, or could be seen as a warning or something. But you say to yourself, I have this goal and I'm here and I've given up, or I've invested already so much of my time and energy and so on, I will want to make sure I've done everything that I could. It is in my power to get to the places where I think I need to be or what I need to fulfill.
Yeah, absolutely. So many times you're not in the place that I wanted to work or I hope it to work. It's like it has to work. And I think when you start getting in that place, it ends up being like a magnet to help you to figure out what you need to do to ultimately get there. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more. I know we touched a little bit upon the problem, but I wanted to hear a little bit more on the problem you're solving and then how you're helping to serve the clients and the people in the organizations that you're working with.
Sure. So I had quite an exciting journey. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I was actually a partner in a PR agency. That was one of my dreams when I was sort of in college. And I said, okay, I want to try it out and I want to see how it is to run campaigns for clients and so on. And it was really a lot of fun. And then one of our clients was actually Fashion Week in Tel Aviv Fashion Week, which was a new project back then, and it very quickly became quite a hot kind of event, and it was fun. And I got for me, what was most exciting, I wasn't a fashionista. I didn't really know much the fashion world, but I was very excited about the art and the artists and the people behind sort of doing fashion and investing into it, not only from a commercial perspective, but doing something super creative. And slowly but surely, I deep dived into this whole industry because I'd worked with technology before, also with startups. I started looking into this junction between innovation and fashion already then. And I became a producer, started traveling around the world, started producing my own shows. And it was a really beautiful and very fun world. I will never deny that. But the more I traveled, the more sophisticated even the events became. The bigger was the problem that I saw or started seeing, which was the lack of taking responsibility for everything that this industry had been leaving behind. I
Hmm.
would see how much money was going into creating the best event and selling or investing into selling as much as possible and creating the best and most sophisticated marketing and PR campaigns. But it really would always stop there, right there, right? So it would be stopping at the place where someone would make sure that as many people as possible would see the collections, as many people as possible would be hyped about the new fashion week and the trends. But nobody was really looking into, okay, what's happening with the flip side of this of the industry. And so, like I think for many people, one of the turning points became the big disaster that happened in Bangladesh. It was the Rana Plaza disaster when an office building collapsed, which, as it then turned out, was actually used as a factory, even though it was an office building. So, by definition, it couldn't. It was a big safety hazard. And then what happened? What probably had to happen, a fire broke out and over 1,000 people got trapped in it and died. And that became a turning point for me and for many people, I think, around the world, that said, okay, how can we continue just wearing clothes or just going about our business without taking responsibility, or at least get interested in what's actually happening with this whole industry that we're all part of, right? You don't have to be designer, you don't have to be in any way connected to it, but you're still wearing clothes, you're still buying clothes, you're still, getting them, and you're still this or other, in this or another way, you're part of it. And so, as I'd been saying before, ultimately, because I guess I'm someone who's naturally curious and wants to try and get to the bottom of the things, I started looking around myself. I started looking, okay, what's out there, who's doing what, and um, I definitely didn't become involved in innovation myself, or definitely not a CEO of a startup for right away. I was first looking for the solutions out there, was getting to know a lot of the approaches and initiatives and ideas, which were a lot of them were really great and amazing. But ultimately, I realized that the problem is so big. We're actually talking about almost 100 million tons of textile waste every year that are being left
Wow.
behind. And I did not find anybody, any approach, or not even a group of organizations or companies which were able to actually tackle this big problem at once and look for a sustainable, but also really doable and realistic solution for that. So this is how, I sort of didn't have a choice, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you for, going through the journey that you went through. And I think that when you see like so many times when we see that there's a better way, or we see that there's an alternative, or even see that maybe no one's maybe trying to find that better way, it becomes something like you said so well, you have to do. It doesn't become something that you want, you feel compelled, like you have, it's like like you said, that word responsibility, duty, to be able to make sure that that happens, or at least the word and information is out there because of that. And for people that may not be as familiar, could you tell us a little bit more about what textiles are, and like how are they a part of the process of what we wear and use on a daily basis?
Right. And also how they're a problem, right? So that's something that we need to
Mm-hmm.
understand. So um I guess the what's important to bear in mind, and that's something that we're all aware of, is that how much the clothing, especially the clothing industry, has transformed in the last decades. I think that this is one of the most fastest growing and also fastest transforming industries. If we're asking maybe even our parents and definitely our grandparents, they lived in a completely different situation. They had a couple of clothing items. They would cherish them and they would wear them with respect. And I guess for many of them, for the weekend, there was maybe something special, right, for special occasions. And that was about it. And people really respected it. The quality was oftentimes actually quite well because it was invested into the one garment, and that was it. And with the changing of industry, manufacturing, and so on, and of course, I guess also a bit the pressure from the entertainment industry and all these other influences, and of course the ability just to manufacture cheaper, for which ultimately, even today, means that someone is earning very very little money, right? So that all of a sudden created the situation where people could actually start buying clothes without any limits. It
Mm-hmm.
also what also happened that even this whole idea that no matter where we're based, most countries have some kind of a charity system set up, right? Which for years and for the longest time had this really great and honorable goal where people that didn't have much could receive clothing for free or for very little money, and so the which also meant that those that had a lot of clothing, and even today still live with this picture where they say, okay, well, whatever I don't need, even if I don't want to wear it anymore and so on, I will just give it to charity. Then there will be needy people that will be happy to receive it. Well, it's not really the case like that anymore because their fast fashion has become so cheap that people will not necessarily want to get something which is second hand if they can get it for very little money. So what happens with most of this clothing that nobody needs anymore, and let's look at the sort of the Western world, it will be shipped overseas. It will be shipped to continents like South America or Africa. And we know already that in Africa, it has killed the local, beautiful textile, rich textile industry because of the stuff that we don't need anymore in the Western countries. So I guess I could go on for hours describing the problem because it has so many facets, right? The cultural, of course, the geopolitical, the economical, the environmental, ultimately, and the health problems. If you go today to India, you will find rivers which are completely poisoned because someone is manufacturing for cheap and doesn't have any problem to pour it afterwards into the river. And the people that are living in the villages surrounding those rivers are all sick. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so these are just really sort of some of the problems, some of the examples of the problems, which are ultimately all leading us back to the way clothing is being manufactured today. On top of it, this is an industry which has has developed a very long supply chain and so many factors along the way. Just think about it. And again, you don't have to be an expert in this industry to for us to understand how it works. Think about some of the brands, some of the brands that you like. Most of the time, the designers which are working for these brands, they will be based somewhere near you or some of the bigger or fashion cities. So they're designing the clothes in one place, but then they're being sent mostly to Asia where they're being sampled. So once then the samples are being sent back to the Western part, and then they're being sent back for approval, and then we get them being manufactured, and then they get to us. But then what happens afterwards, nobody even knows anymore because it's very hard to track it down. Okay, so this is a huge, humongous supply chain where clothing items sometimes travel thousands and 10,000s of miles back and forth. So I think you don't have to be an expert to understand how not sustainable this is and how much in our modern times in 2024, it's about time to start changing that. Maybe just to add also to the understanding that, so we believe in our company, we definitely believe that the future will need to be circular. That means that ultimately we'll have to find a way for our clothing to be manufactured in such a way that it could be compostable, biodegradable. It should not cause any harm, but it will take a while. Okay, it will take a while until we get there. So in the meantime, as I've mentioned before, we have these mountains of clothing, of discarded textiles, because we have on top of the clothing. Look around you. You have so many different textile items in your homes. In the car alone, there are over 40 textile products. So
Wow.
textiles are everywhere. And in the end of the day, they also need to be recycled in some way, one or another. So this is why we said, okay, after what we've just heard, it's very hard, definitely for one company, for one startup to tackle this whole huge supply chain, this whole ecosystem. It will take some time. It might take a decade and even maybe longer until this is all going to change. But in the meantime, we have all the waste that needs to be tackled already today because the damage it's creating is already so huge and it has such an impact on our lives and on the lives of everybody, that and on the environment of course too, that we must act with this now. And this is why we decided to focus on how we take textile waste and valorize it into new products.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you all, doing that work and getting that information out there. Sometimes again, we wear the clothes, we have the clothes, we drive in our car, do all the things. We don't really think about like what happens after, what happens and where does this go? We don't realize all of those things, which I think is so powerful in terms of what you all are doing, in terms of course, getting that awareness out there. Because I think if people were, at the very least, I hope at least, were a little bit more informed, they wouldn't necessarily make those decisions. But I think it's just so powerful in everything that you all are able to do to be able to kind of empower people and create that awareness for that to happen. So how could you, I guess, drill down a little bit more on how you all are tackling that and helping the world to be that better place?
So we decided that we don't want to be in this place where we're pointing the finger at anybody and saying you are bad. We need economy. Economy creates jobs. Companies are we need that out there. We don't want to say let's just change everything from scratch and delete. This is not possible. We want to be realistic. We also want to be able to offer a solution as soon as possible. And so we're trying to be, or we, from the very beginning, we wanted to be very practical and we wanted to work with what there was out there. So what we realized when we started out, we actually created a pilot where we collected 10 tons of textile waste. You do need to imagine a bit of a mountain of clothing that had been coming from all kinds of different sources. We actually wanted to study where where textile waste is coming from in one city. And we had people bringing it from their homes. Partly we had brands that were bringing what's called dead stock, which is another sad story because a lot of brands, most brands don't get to sell everything that they manufacture today.
Mm.
So it's called dead stock and they need to find a solution for that. because oftentimes they cannot just resell it for economical reasons. But they wanted to find an alternative, so they brought us what they had, and we had the charities, which, as I mentioned before, they're so overwhelmed with what they're receiving, most of the donations, that they also need to find a solution of what to do with everything they cannot sell or even give away for free. So we were collecting all of that, and that allowed us to really to create a very in-depth study about the clothing, understand the composition of it, the way, in what way it would be coming in, the quantity, the quality. And so, what we understood from that study, from that pilot, was that we must tackle one of the biggest problems in if we want to upcycle or valorize textile waste, which is how we can actually separate between the two big groups that most of our clothing and even other textiles are made of, and which is most those the part of the clothing or the fabrics which come from natural sources. So think of cotton, for instance, and the other big group which is from synthetic sources like polyester. Now, you don't have to be chemists. You don't have to, again, have all the deep understanding to probably realize that if something comes from such two different groups, very almost opposite groups of sources, then it's very hard to actually recycle them or treat them in the same way, and then still have them be separated and have the same quality. We also understood that we want to make it, we need to create some kind of a green process. And because we don't want to create more harm and damage to the environment. And so we were lucky. By the way, when I'm saying we, was mostly my co-founder and I, and I come more from, as I said, from production and from the business of fashion. And my co-founder is actually a textile fashion manufacturer. So she also understands sort of the whole idea behind it. And we teamed up with some researchers that understood chemistry and textiles, and also had the vision and understanding that it's about time that we try to find another solution for this big problem. And as a result, we developed our own technology. In the end of the day, we really took the time to work in labs and test and look and interview many organizations which had some kind of similar ideas, or at least had the idea of what can be done, what can be created. Some of them failed, some of them only remained on an academic level, but we were very driven to become a company. We really wanted to go out and offer a solution. And so ultimately, what we created was, we call it the Smart Up system, which is ultimately a technical system that knows how to, on the one hand, get in the textiles, any kind of, or most of the textiles out there that don't have any other solution today, they cannot be reworn. And it undergoes a biotech process, which what it knows to do is it to transform the textiles into three new raw materials. So we're basically breaking them
Mm,
down into three new raw materials. And these new raw materials we can then apply into different industries. So that's
mm,
basically how it works. We are able to achieve a separation between the natural and synthetic fibers, which is crucial for manufacturing and recycling, because this way it can be recycled much easier the next time that it needs to undergo this process. So I think that we've really invested already a lot of thought in every step of what needs to be done. And of course, there's always room, and we will continue optimizing it and making it more commercial and so on. But we're already in a quite a good path with that.
yeah, I appreciate you so much in breaking that down, and especially like you said, that powerful word, the practicality of that, and to be able to understand that there's an issue right now, and how can we help solve that issue, and to be able to kind of create that innovation in terms of doing that. I almost wonder, because I know you touched on, you and your co-founder. I wonder if that's a part of your secret sauce, maybe the secret sauce of the entire organization, the DNA of it, is being able to kind of marry that awareness of the industry, but also sometimes the ability to be able to communicate with people that may not have that technical knowledge. Do you feel like you all are able to kind of marry those two things so that you can, first of all, of course, be able to create that innovative solution, but secondly, I think be able to communicate to those that may not be as aware of how pressing and important that issue is. Do you think that's part of your secret sauce?
I think that, well, in a way, I guess in some way, I am that person maybe because, like, it's as I said before, my co-founder had spent many years in factories. She knows how to touch a textile and understand what can be done with it and what cannot be done with it. She can analyze it, from her experience, and I had to learn it. I mean, of course, when we joined forces, I had already had my own experience working with designers, understanding, I guess maybe the quality of a fabric, but not never from the technical side. So it's I love that you're asking me this because I want to say something which I think most of us, definitely the younger generations, we sort of forget that, we're so used to the culture of going into a coffee shop and pulling out our laptop and just doing something. And I'm not saying there's anything bad with that. I do that too. But thanks to definitely also the partnership, for me, I started to fall in love with machines, with technology, and I realized how remote we are from it today. I mean, we cannot function without um, production, without someone producing it for us. If we look around ourselves, if we look at our gadgets, about things that we really cannot do anything every day, was standing in a factory, someone was assembling it, someone was planning it, someone was engineering it, and I think it could be a much more interesting world and much more attached, and I'm sure also much more sustainable and responsible world if we were to create a connection to where the things that we use on a daily basis were coming from and how they're manufactured, right? It goes back a bit to what I was saying about how for decades clothing and textiles and fabrics have been created. At the end of the day, you can say this for a lot of things around us. And most of us have lost this connection or maybe never had it. And I think it would be really amazing. And so for me, going back to your question, it's really, yes, when I started building this connection, going into a factory, and believe me, I'm not always interested. I don't need to understand, every single step of the operation, but I appreciate and I respect it so much more than I definitely did before. And this is how it makes me want to understand the processes behind it, and like I said, really respect it.
Yeah, I appreciate you expounding upon that because I get so excited by hearing someone's journey in their business, what let them get started, what idea they see, what problems they see, and all those things. And you start to hear like how they start to progress through, the stages and all those things happen. And I love what you said because we often don't do those same things to some of the things that are around us of saying, what is that journey? What happens after I drink this coffee? Where does it go? What happens after I donate my t or put my t-shirt wherever it is? Like we don't start to ask those questions. So I appreciate you because it brings awareness to the journey of the things that are around us, the technology, like how it's just all those things. And I think that, as you said so well, you don't have to understand all the nuances of it, but I think sometimes by just asking those questions, that can sometimes be the most powerful thing. You start to realize, just as you did, that wow, I didn't realize this happened. You start to really become curious on not just what happens, but then also maybe to how to create a better world as a result of that. So I think that's extremely powerful, and I love that that's part of your secret sauce, the DNA of you, and of course the organization as well too. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Actually, so maybe it will be a bit different from what people usually say. I don't my approach is never to look just for one person or book or source. My approach is the exact opposite, which is the curiosity to try and get to know as many inputs and insights as possible, right? Because I think you have to have it nowadays as a CEO. Never look at just for one person or source.
Yeah, I love that. There's a book that I always talk about called Range, and it talks so much about how so many times we're siloed, thinking that you have to be, sometimes really great at one thing. And I think it talks about a lot of athletes that are great at one thing or whatever. But we start to realize that the world's starting to come together, and there's so many different things. There's not just one reason. Sometimes when things happen, there's so many different reasons for that. So you almost have to have that curious mindset where you are taking in different inputs, looking at things in different way, different industries, whatever it is, because that's where the solutions come from. They don't come from, hey, this is how this industry has always done it. You have to sometimes look outside or around or upside down or wherever to try to get to that solution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. So, what would you consider to be what I call a little bit more of a CEO nugget? This could be like a word of wisdom or a piece of advice. It might be something you might tell your favorite business client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Yeah. So, also maybe it might be something less traditional, also because it doesn't necessarily fit with my nature, because I'm a person that very much believes that every voice needs to be heard, and I think it is important in a company that everybody feels at home. But having said that, it's crucial to remember that if you are a CEO of a company, that you need to know when to set boundaries, because it's very important to people. Ultimately, need to know. Um, they need to be looking up at you to know what's right and what's wrong, and it is your job, right? And I'm saying this because, again, especially in the startup, they're not traditional, right? I'm not an, um, I hope it's okay to say I'm not an old wild male that, is a typical CEO of a big corporate. I have people that are older in my team, and that's fine, but they have made that decision, right? They're not CEOs. So in a way, that means that I need to be the one sometimes to say, no, this is how it's going to go. While still completely respecting that and never doing this because I want to undermine them, but because I think that I'm the one that maybe sees the whole picture, and I am the one that also needs to take the responsibility, and therefore making sure we have this decision and direction that I would be choosing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely okay. I'm not that either, so that helps
I
out
know.
too. But I think that, again, going back to what we talked about with your secret sauce, I feel like that ends up being like a really powerful thing because, again, like getting those disparate thoughts, the diversity in thoughts and thinking and experiences and all those things, and having those conversations is huge, as you kind of talked about with your hack. But in the same time, with your nugget, you have to make sure that you are taking in as much information, but you do create those boundaries because you want to remember that you are creating whatever that mission is, whatever problem you're trying to solve, whatever thing you're trying to do to impact the world. And there's a kind of a fine line between balancing, making sure that you are taking those thoughts while at the same time making sure you're staying true to what you were created to
Yeah.
do.
Yes, yes, and it's sometimes it's a fine line, or sometimes you sort of forget about it. But yeah, it's crucial to stick to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that nugget. And so now I want to ask you my absolute favorite question. We kind of already touched on this as well too, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Victoria, what does being a CEO mean to you?
So being a CEO is it's almost a physical thing. It's like there's something that you're like you're carrying it with you. Okay, you really are out there. And I guess again, well, I don't know. I was going to say it makes a difference maybe if you're CEO of a startup or if an established company. Of course, there's a difference, I'm sure. But in the end of the day, the idea is the same, right? You have this. Of course, there's the legal responsibility, but mostly I think it's really feeling that weight, which doesn't have to be something bad. It also means that, again, there are people that are trusting you to do this, and they are from so many different ecosystems and from different networks, especially, yeah, well, in a startup or in any company, I guess, for that matter, all the stakeholders in the end of the day that also make up your company. So it's exciting. It's not something I'm afraid of. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. It's something that I feel honored to be doing. But I also feel that I guess for me, it's also taking it very, very seriously. Again, in a world where there's so many startups, and sometimes, when I see someone is adding me LinkedIn and I see they write they're a CEO co-founder, but they never write of what, and I'm like, do you understand what it actually means? Like, so are you really a CEO, or are you just something? And it's fine, but maybe you shouldn't be calling it CEO then. So it's also like with all the other things, it's respecting its responsibility, respecting the role, and doing everything you need to do, because yeah, there are people that are standing behind you, and they have expectations, and they have the trust they've put into you, and you better do a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that visual of carrying it, because I think when you have that charge, that purpose, that mission, then you're driven to do that, then you feel like you're carrying it. Like, again, like we talked about before, it's not that I want to do, it's not that I hope to do, it's like I have to do this. And that's when you have that weight. And there's a quote that if there's no pressure, there's no diamonds. And it kind of reminded me of that with what you were talking about and the responsibility that you have and how really great things can come out of it. Not to say that there's not the pressure, not the stress, not those things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those things are all the time bad.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's just the way how you see it, and again, it's really not for everyone, right? So you have to be that person that enjoys, and they can also thrive if there's stress, but can work with it. And I guess it's also something that everybody should ask themselves, right? Can I be? Do I have to be in this position, or maybe it's not the right thing for me? That's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have that realization, that self awareness, even to say that maybe this isn't the right path, or this is my right path, or whatever it is, you decide either way, it's the right answer. So
Yeah.
truly appreciate that definition. Of course, I appreciate your time even more. So what I want to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best people can get a hold of you, find about all the awesome things you and your team are working on.
Yeah, I think that just be passionate. Follow your passions. You can't always do that, because it might sometimes clash with other goals or other tasks that you have in life. But truly, there's there are so many choices that people have these days, and I think never ever in humanity did we have so many opportunities also, to create a lot of things with not so little, to not so much, sorry, and also to just have a lot of experiences, again, with not too many things, and maybe even not too much effort. But even that sometimes we sort of forget to do, because we consume too much of something that someone else did, right? I think this is actually, like, I'm sort of paraphrasing what Steve Jobs actually said, that he said, you shouldn't be just following someone else's achievements and life. Create your own. And you don't have to worry about what they did. Just do what you did. Think about what is it that you create, what is it that you experience that is your own. I think this is something that I really hope people will do. In a way, it's like, be your own CEO. You don't have to become a CEO of a company, but make sure you're your own CEO with all the responsibility, and but also the experience, and again, the amazing opportunities it brings with it.
Yes, absolutely. No, I love that. And for people that want to get a hold of you, find about all the awesome things you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
So LinkedIn, I think, is definitely the best way. Viktoria Kanar, and you can of course follow also our LinkedIn page, which is Refresh Global, minus Fresh Global. You will always see our updates. We're not currently, most of operations are in Germany. And the reason is because in the EU, the European Union is very advanced with their policies in terms of textile recycling. But there are already a couple of states in the US, like New York State and California, which are also very active. So we hope to come with our solution soon to the US, soon enough. But of course, we're open to any discussion. We're open to for people to approach us if they have any questions, if they want to consult, if they want to suggest an idea. We really try to also give back to everybody so that, pay it forward sort of. Happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We truly appreciate you for, of course, paying it forward for us today. To make it even easier, we're gonna have the links and information in the show notes as well too, so that everybody can follow up with you, your team, find out about all the awesome things that you're doing. But I truly appreciate that last moment and the last nugget you kind of left with us. I always say if you run your own race, you can't lose. And I think so many times we don't take the time to figure out what our race is. We're looking to the left, to the right, upside, downside to try to figure out what somebody else is doing and trying to pattern that when the true power is in what we can do. So thank you so much for being that, for doing that, and remind us of how important that is. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you so, so much. Thanks for having me.